So welcome to this seminar by In-House Communications. We're delighted to welcome you today to our event on how life sciences can lead a post-pandemic recovery in the UK. I'm Katie Perrier, I'm Chair of In-House Communications, and a warm welcome today. So much to get through in this hour, and interest and excitement in this sector has never been higher. From levelling up to the skills agenda, do we have the right infrastructure to really make the most of these opportunities? And what advantages does leaving the European Union bring to us? To discuss all of this and a lot more, we're very pleased to have a great panel today. First up, the Right Honourable Kwasi Kwarteng, Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Heba Bevan, CEO and founder of Utterberry, Charlotte Pickles, Director of Reform, and Richard Irwin, General Manager of Roche Products. Before we delve into a range of issues, first of all, a quick reminder to invite the audience to ask questions via the panel. You can do this, it's really, really simple, very easy. Just type it into the chat function and that will wing its way over to me, and we'll get through as many questions as we possibly can in the next hour. So first up, I'm going to invite opening remarks and comments from the Secretary of State. Good afternoon, Kwasi, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's really good to be at this forum, particularly at the Spring Forum, which I've attended many times in person. I just want to say very briefly that clearly what's happened with the vaccine rollout, with the fact that within 1 year we managed to develop a vaccine, we managed to produce it, obtain it, and then distribute it to the point where I think today something like 28 million of our people have been vaccinated. I think this is one of the great stories, the great innovation stories, the great economic stories of our time, and I think it's something which this country should be very proud of. Of course, that success was based on the fact that we had a very strong life sciences research base. We've had, I think, a very good relationship between government and also the sector. I certainly, in my first 2 months, have met with a whole range of people, you know, from John Bell to Ben Osborne of Sir John Bell, Ben Osborne of Pfizer, Dame Emma Walmsley of GSK, whole range of people who are actively involved in driving life sciences, pharmaceuticals as well. And I think that the future is very bright. What I've done is, in my first 2 months as Secretary of State for BEIS, is actually ask for an innovation strategy, because I think that some of the talent, some of the skill that we adapted to life sciences can also apply in other areas. And I think it's very important that we manage to learn the lessons from the vaccine rollout and apply it in other areas.
Fantastic, and I'm sure we'd like to hear a lot more about that in time. Heba, can I come over to you to talk about the relationship between business and government, and also, you know, the exciting times for your business within the sector?
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. This is Heba Bevan. I'm the CEO and founder of Utterberry Limited. We are a London-based company. We manufacture hardware and as well we program all our software. And we do end-to-end solution for infrastructure. So we've monitored one of the key infrastructure in London, such as Crossrail, London Underground, as well Network Rail's asset. And we did as well major monitoring on Thames Tideway last few years. So on the key bridges like Tower Bridge, Vauxhall Bridge, Blackfriars Bridge. And currently we are looking into an expansion through building new manufacturing in the UK that it will hopefully supply a different kind of environment, and it will create an innovation hub where it will bring in quantum computing, wireless sensing, AI, machine learning, and hopefully increasing new skills within our environment and engineering. So thank you very much for having me.
Great, and we'll come back to you, Heba, in a minute to talk about some of the challenges you face, but also some of the great opportunities that you have in front of you. Richard, can I come to you now with some of the opening comments, please?
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for the opportunity. Maybe to jump straight to it, yes, we can. We can make life sciences one major contributor to our post-pandemic recovery. I would just like to maybe jump on the comments of the Secretary of State, because I think many of us feel very proud of the sector and how it's contributed, whether that be on testing, where we had little infrastructure, whether it be on, of course, vaccines, And I think also the fact that we've now within 12 months got therapeutics that mean that even if patients do get hospitalized with COVID, we can actually make a difference and hopefully have a lot of those recover. What's important though, is the UK has made a major contribution in all of those areas. And I think if I just draw on one piece, which is what the Recovery and Remap CAP studies have done, they have led the world in terms of defining what is best practice for patients hospitalized with COVID. The innovation has come from the UK. I work for obviously a big life sciences company, and maybe a comment to say, you know, we are a big employer in the UK. It's one of our 3 global headquarters. I have about 2,000 brilliant colleagues, but even with that strong base, we can do more. And I think this is what should be our passion. I see opportunities to still bring more talent to the UK in terms of more positions. And I definitely feel in the area of clinical research that actually we can be doing more again. So I guess my intro is that I think we have contributed and we can continue to be a major contributor in terms of UK performance, and maybe just quickly, and making sure that patients are the major enablers and also recipients of that benefit. It should be all about patients.
Thank you, Richard. I think some very important points that you raised there. And Charlotte, can I come to you, last but not least, to talk about the relationship also between the sector and government?
Yeah, I mean, I think the life sciences sector is one of the real success stories. And actually, I think it's a great example of when government puts its mind to it, it can put in place some incredible infrastructure, incredible programs, initiatives, investment support to really make a part of our economy sing. And we do have a world-leading life sciences sector, and that is in large part down to some of the initiatives that the government, this government and previous governments over the last decade have done. And I think it's incredible. I suppose a kind of few reflections in terms of the recovery. We're already seeing the fact that life sciences are literally leading the recovery, because without the vaccines and, importantly, as Richard mentioned, the therapeutics, we wouldn't be able to be unlocking and moving from crisis to recovery in the first place. But I think there are 2 other things which people have touched on, and one is actually, and Richard mentioned patients, but you know, our recovery is going to require much more movement in terms of health outcomes than dealing with COVID. You know, we have seen the health inequalities. You know, we have some challenges around our cancer survival rates. You know, there are all sorts of issues in health, and the life sciences industry, the innovation that the Secretary of State talked about, is going to be what helps us to tackle that. So you've got the health aspect of moving forward and building back better, and then of course the economic aspect. And you know, life sciences make the biggest contribution to R&D of any sector in the country. You know, they do employ a lot of people, they could employ a lot more, and there's a huge potential to contribute to the levelling up agenda. So I think it's a really exciting period. I think we are seeing a lot of other countries snapping at our heels now in terms of some of the innovation, and we're seeing billions being put into things like medtech, which we're a leader in at the moment. So I think there's some challenges we have to face up to, but overall, I'm incredibly excited about what this sector can do over the coming decade.
Thanks, Charlotte. And can I go back to some of the comments that several of you raised around levelling up and you know, key deliverables for delivering on the Prime Minister's agenda, and how we all know that the kind of the Oxford-Cambridge arc is that, you know, that key place we can turn to think about, look at the growth in the UK. But how do we get really good quality jobs in other parts of the country and skill sets? And you know, what does a 14-year-old in Hull or Peterborough think about jobs in life sciences in the future? And Cardi, can I come to you with that question?
Look, I think that's critically important, and of course what we haven't mentioned is the whole levelling up agenda, but that's exactly where this fits in. I think that one of the things that one of the silver linings out of this dark cloud of COVID is the fact that the vaccine rollout, everybody knows about it. I mean, everybody has either done it themselves, which is nearly half the population had a vaccine, or knows somebody who's been vaccinated, or a parent, a loved one. And so it could not have been a better advert for what we're doing in life sciences. And I think a lot of young people, I hope, and I expect a lot of young people will be motivated by that. The other thing that we've been doing a lot over the last, and this isn't something that was just happened over the last 2 years, but really over 10 years, we've really driven STEM subjects in schools, and particularly, I think, and I've been going to these events for a long time, STEM with women, girls at school, and driving, other people from diverse backgrounds into these kinds of professions. And I think with the vaccine rollout that's been so conspicuously successful, I think there's a real chance for a renaissance. Well, it's not really a renaissance; it's just a great expansion of what we're doing in terms of innovation, and particularly in life sciences.
I think it's become cooler than ever, though, right? I mean, people
exactly. That's
lives, and that's something that younger people will really sit up and take note of.
And also, one of the things I would say on this is that one of the problems that we've always had with science teaching is that it seems extremely abstract. I mean, many of us, remember science from schools, from schooling and all that, and it seemed very remote. Whereas I think with a vaccine and the success of the rollout, it's directly applicable, that people can see the effects, the good effects of innovation and of science and research. And I think that will have a big impact.
And Heba, can come to you in terms of your business, kind of spin off from university, as it were, to how you can get more people into your line of work. I know that you are looking to open headquarters in the UK and kind of quite a sizable number of employees. What does that future look like for you?
Well, as a tech company, and we spun out of Cambridge University back in 2013, and this is our 8th year. The challenge actually, it's grabbing these talents from around different universities, not just Cambridge and Oxford. We've got in this country amazing universities. If it's in the north, like York, Leeds, Sheffield, I think they are really, really good university. Bristol, of course, and Southampton. We do have Cardiff in Wales, in Scotland as well, Edinburgh. So there is a really rich history of different universities that actually contribute to that talent. However, the engineering sector, I think as a STEM ambassador, I think it has been really lacking in certain aspect of getting more students into it and getting people excited about the technology and to embrace it. It's a great, I think it's what the government has done with the vaccine is absolutely great. It's astonishing to see. It makes me so proud of everybody's just and how things actually worked out. Being proud as well, being British, to see that is done and the scale across the country. My parents had the vaccine, so it's a great aspect on how can we deliver on something in a short time. The same things I think we need to do with technology, and to be that we need to be upfront for it. Why FDA approval for certain tech it's more advanced than MHRA, for example. So we have a COVID multi-scanner symptom device that we actually filed patents. We developed it in the UK. Why do we have now the opportunity to export it to US before actually embedding it in the UK? And I think this is things which is we need to exactly do what we've done with the vaccine with the tech industry, because we have amazing engineers. I've worked in the US. I'm a CPU engineer, so I'm an electronics and computer engineer. And I actually think when I worked in the US, compared to what I've seen and the talent and the amount of education we've got in this country, especially in engineering, it's far advanced than other countries. And we should actually use the advantage of it. We don't have the Google, the Apples, the big corporation in tech to lead that kind of things. And I think we need to give the opportunities to startups and to companies to lead that environment, because we do have the brains for it, we have the skills for it, and we've got the universities that we can grab talent from.
I lost you a little bit at the end there, but I think I got the gist of it. And Richard, do you find that in your business as well, just in terms of speed to market? I know regulation is very important. That's why we have such faith in the vaccination. We've got to remember in the first place that we know that this country, has got a high, threshold and bar before they consider going down that route. But does this apply to your business as well?
I think I'm sure we're going to come and talk repeatedly about how important it is to have a world-class regulator. And I think we are very, very lucky to have one who I think has moved more quickly but with robust science and making sure that patient safety is never compromised. So I think that's really vital. I did just want to maybe comment on this levelling up though, because I'm sure like many of us, we've all lived in multiple countries. There is unacceptable differences in almost all countries. I think what we've seen through COVID, we've gone from saying they're unacceptable to doing something about it. And I think this is something that there is huge commitment to address. I think industry at all levels, and not just in life sciences, can be a really important enabler of that. And I know that certainly many companies in our sector support STEM activities, but I think we have to be asking, can we do more? And maybe just a comment, I think we all, especially in companies, need to maybe look internally before we criticize others. And I think, we've got to look at a number of these pieces. Look, when we run clinical trials, we exclude major populations, and actually that has become a hugely positive big thing over the last 12 months. Companies big and small are saying, how do we go to actually the populations who are most in need of having access to innovative clinical trials and otherwise? So a number of really important themes where we can lead.
I think that's very important. I mean, Kwasi, should I give you the opportunity to come back on some of those points, especially what Heba said around, British products being used abroad probably before they are in the UK, and also some of the points that Richard raised there?
Look, I think the main thing that we need to think about, I think Richard's point about looking at companies, looking at ourselves, as it were, and our institutions, and seeing what we can do to improve diversity and leveling up. I think that was very important. Mm. I also think that, before we get ahead of ourselves in terms of saying which British products can be used outside of Britain, I mean, there is a market, there is a trade thing, and I don't want to abandon free market principles. I've been accused of doing that too much. If there's a demand globally for stuff made in Britain, we've got to accommodate that. But I do think that in terms of the levelling up agenda, we had a specific ask in the UK. I mean, I was a PPS in the Treasury, and I could see that all the Treasury models essentially reinforced investment in the Southeast, because that was, where, according to the model, that was where you had most productivity. And you can see very quickly you get a kind of virtuous cycle for the Southeast, because the more you invest, the more productivity you get, the more productivity, the more better return, the more you invest. And I think there was a very legitimate observation that actually we should try and break that cycle to an extent by trying to spread economic opportunity more evenly, more broadly across the United Kingdom. And that's something that I'm very proud to be involved in.
Charlotte, that brings you in brilliantly here. It's like a brilliant lead up from the Secretary of State there, but that's quite important, isn't it? On a panel earlier today, we were actually talking to the Transport Secretary, and someone mentioned we have to be prepared to fail at times, just to try things to see if they will work. And I don't think we've always been a little bit risk averse, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of that is the culture of government and the civil service. And, I spent a bit of time in government during the coalition years as an advisor. And, I was really struck by just how not risk aware, which it's vital we are, if we're dealing with taxpayers' money and ultimately lives when you're talking about healthcare, but actually risk averse. And you can't do innovation if you're not willing to take risks. And that's where I think, again, the government is doing really well. We've got ARIA, which is being implemented, which is going to be our version of the very famous US DARPA. And that's all about taking risks and being willing to fail and accepting failure. But you're right, we've had industrial strategies, we've had all sorts of initiatives, we've had programs, place-based programs for decades trying to deliver some form of levelling up. And some of those have been partially successful and some of them haven't. But what the government is going to need to do is try things, and it's going to, I think there are some great, take the life sciences, for example, and linking it to the idea of levelling up. I think there are several things that are going on which will be really positive. So, for example, we need R&D to be spent outside, as the Secretary of State is saying, outside of London and the South East. It's the R&D spend in London and South East is more than double, in fact, than areas like the North East or Yorkshire and the Humber. And that's precisely one of the reasons why the government is looking at, for example, the R&D tax credits, because we need to work out how you incentivize big businesses to invest in the areas. You also, and I know, Katie, you had another panel earlier today, having a fantastic day back-to-back of events, but on thinking about how to make create places that people want to live. Because, if you want people to stay and work in those areas, you also have to ensure not just that there's great jobs, but there's great living conditions for them. And again, the government are thinking about the cultural infrastructure, the social infrastructure, the public services infrastructure that will mean that people want to go and live in those areas. But as a final point, I think also we shouldn't be too pessimistic. It is very much an uphill challenge, I think, to deliver this. But if you look at places like Leeds, which is a knowledge cluster for medtech, we are seeing this happen, and we need to learn those lessons and replicate that in other areas, work out what we want to focus on in a particular area, create the cluster, and that will help us to get out of the kind of London, Oxford, Cambridge triangle that we're slightly trapped in at the moment.
You mentioned, Charlotte, ARIA, and I don't know if the Secretary of State can come in and just update us on any kind of development there, or timeframes, or anything that you think that the sector and the business community might be interested in.
Absolutely. I think ARIA is one of the great sort of innovating measures that the government has done, certainly since I've been elected to Parliament in 2010. And what ARIA is essentially the agency, well, it's called the Advanced Research and Invention Agency. And it does what it says. It's nimble. It's going to be a lot less bureaucratic. It's going to be quite streamlined and slimline in the first instance. And I think it'll be able to promote slightly more risk research projects with a greater risk profile, perhaps. As Charlotte said, we've got to be prepared to embrace failure. We've got to be prepared to try things. And really from that culture, and I think Charlotte mentioned DARPA and ARPA as it was, I think there are great opportunities. There's a great potential for really coming up with life-changing, world-changing research. ARPA famously was responsible for developments that led to the internet, for other developments that have really changed our world. And ARIA, slightly small scale to begin with, but I think it's a really different type of institution that we're creating. And I've, in just 2 months as Secretary of State, I've spoken to Nobel laureates, great researchers, people who've got brilliant credentials in research and also experience of government and business. And they all say, almost without fail, that ARIA is a really, really good step in the right direction.
Excellent. I've got some questions in from the panel. Again, if you're watching and you haven't yet asked a question and you want to, just type it into the chat. It will come through to me and I'll try and mention as many as possible. So question in, can the panel comment on the role of AI in the life sciences sector, particularly how we can make the most of emerging technology to the benefit of public health? Hiba, can I come to you on that question, just around AI? I know that's an important part of your business model moving forward.
Yes, and thank you very much, Katie. As when we started designing the system, we started in low power wireless sensor and infrastructure and construction. However, in 2016, we started looking into how can we use sensors in life sciences in detecting new diseases. So we did some research on a prostate cancer as well, infection diseases, and how can we actually have non-intrusive way to detect infections, and we filed patents on it. And last year during the pandemic, it really hit us. We can actually do more. So we looked into all the symptoms, for example, that is coming in through COVID. And this is not just one or two symptoms, actually symptoms like nitric oxide. People emit nitric oxide when they are having a problem with their breathing. So if they have asthma attacks as well, they will emit nitric oxide. So can we actually detect these kind of variables? Can we detect other variables where people heart rate is kind of fluctuating or having anarrhythmic kind of beats, And fascinating, we developed the technology, which is really enable us to detect these symptoms without having a patient having a blood sample or a fluid sample. So it's non-intrusive kind of technology that's enable us. And when we start seeing new technologies, or even like the sniffing dog for COVID, well, we can have technologies which is can tell us and detect these chemicals emitting from the bodies. And how can we amalgamate these technologies and take these measurements and collect it in certain way, applying an AI algorithms and a machine learning and learning from it. And the good thing is as well from the machine learnings and the AI, if we have enough samples, we can actually detect, not just detect COVID, we actually probably able to detect different type of diseases, and we can learn from it because we are sampling a huge amount of data. And the machine learning and the AI, it's capable as well to provide us with something, I would call it biological fencing, where you will have detecting any kind of different variables or different symptoms that is not related to COVID, but it could be very important for realizing the symptoms it's getting higher because there's a new strain, or there is a heart rate is variant, or a different frequency coming in from our voice, or different gases emitting from our body. And these data actually could give us very good solid ground to build analytics that enhance the AI and the machine learning. And funny enough, I was talking to Richard before that, and what are the differences, how we use AI right now, detecting bridges and tunnel collapse and these kind of things. And we can actually detect it before what happens. So one of the things during our work with the Crossrail in Al Nashaf, we detected the flooding 4 weeks before it happens and the water leaks. And the same things here, where our system and our sensors, where actually our body is full of cells and they are full of neurons, and actually they can detect certain things, and they memorize, and they calculate these really minute changes as happen, and we react towards them. So definitely we can get trained machine learning and new technology for exploring different path of medicine and life sciences.
And just to build on that, Richard, you talked earlier around all of that, how does it benefit the patient? If we put the patient first, in terms of, some of the personalized help that we can support, we can give them, the fact that they can know so much more about their own healthcare and educate themselves means that they are more in control about their own healthcare in the future. And that's, that's something that all businesses, I think, are looking in this space, are looking more at. Do you want to come in a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think I concur with everyone. AI, machine learning, or even just data can herald paradigm shifts in terms of improvement in patient outcomes, possibly the biggest that we may come across in many decades. If I just, I think, use one example, when you look at improving cancer outcomes, actually, I shouldn't say this, but it's not all about medicines, it's all about early screening and diagnosis, picking up the patients very early, and what we can do with AI to actually help GPs know what symptoms may be cancer in a complete mix of things that could be 1,000 other diseases. So I think we will see large areas like that, AI applied to the very early screening and diagnosis of major diseases that we know if it's successful, it will dramatically change outcomes. Clearly, we use it within our portfolio, our research and development, and it's made major changes within that improves our R&D productivity, and is, for many companies, made real differences in terms of getting to improvements in outcomes in hard to treat diseases. So really critical theme. Maybe final point, plenty of parts of the UK where we really lead and excel in this area. And I think some of the innovation from our university hospitals and others. Leeds was mentioned in terms of data and AI. This can be a major enabler again in terms of UK leadership.
Thank you. We've got two questions in and are pretty much very similar, and so it shows the strength of the interest in this. What more can be done to encourage more investors towards UK startups in the life science sector? I was speaking to someone the other day and they said that they invest in businesses in the US and in the UK, and the ones in the UK are twice as good as some of those they invest in the US, and the ones in the US are twice as valuable as the ones in the UK. Where are we going wrong? Kwasi, can I come to you?
And one of the things, I mean, this is one of the big issues. So just to sketch the problem very broadly, we have, and this is a historic problem, okay? It's been going on for a very long time. But we have one of the best research bases, science bases in the world. We've also got some of the best, most sophisticated finance professionals and deepest capital markets in the world. And for some reason, we've been not very good at using capital to scale up research from universities. I think we're getting better at it, but there's still a long way to go. And I think there are a number of things that we need to think about. I mean, I think first of all, there are rules around pension funds and the kinds of things that they can invest in. I'm always told that if we tweak those rules, we can unlock a lot of capital. That's one reason. Two, I think the culture of the investors needs to change. We have a City of London that is very focused in the City of London and doesn't really get out of the City of London very much. But of course, a lot of the innovation, the research that we're doing is outside of the City of London, and we've got to try and connect more efficiently the pools of capital with the great ideas. And then there are other things that we should be able to do. I mean, I think one of the things, the issues we have, and that's why we've created ARIA to a certain extent, is that we've got a very kind of top-down approach to R&D itself. So basically, a lot of the money is funneled through government, through organizations like UKRI, and we need to think of other models in terms of leveraging in capital right from the start. And then if it's leveraged in from the start, I think it's more likely to be able to contribute and help companies grow. There are lots of factors to this, and you know, from a personal point of view, I used to live near in Paddington, near St Mary's Hospital, which, is many of you will know, was where Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. There's even a pub called the Sir Alexander Fleming just there, and that's a classic example of something which was discovered essentially in Britain, but of course all the commercial benefit was exploited by American companies, American pharmaceutical companies, who led the charge on antibiotics. So that's a classic example, historic example, of where we have gone wrong. I think it's improving, but I think there's still a long way to go. And one of my jobs as obviously the base secretary is to try and figure out ways in which we can get money into scale ups. Now, one of the things, just lastly, on the point about the American companies being more valuable, there is a huge amount of capital there. There is just a huge domestic market. You go to America anyway, there are lots and lots of investors with billions, institutional investors, and they're all chasing these assets. So they do have a natural advantage in terms of just the size of the investor base.
It's a very good point. And do you think we sell out too early as Brits as well, in terms of?
There's a whole culture. I mean, there are literally written books on how we sell out and how, you know, our dream is to sell a company and then move to the country and buy a nice house. Whereas an American businessman is more likely to scale up their business to a larger extent. There's a whole range of issues about culture and expectations that we probably don't have enough time to go into.
And there's something there about risk and risk appetite as well, I think. Charlotte,
I think of the investor base, I think you're right.
Yeah. Charlotte, can I come to you and talk to you about, you know, government risk and, you know, what else the government could do to attract investment in the UK, and also, you know, put its money where its mouth is in terms of support for some of the things that the government themselves buy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the government is, you know, it's being very ambitious on its R&D target. I think there are all sorts of pots of money. There are kind of support structures that government is trying to put in place around startups and, you know, more broadly innovation within the life sciences sector. I do think there are a couple of other observations. I mean, first of all, I'd say I don't think we should be too negative. I mean, the life sciences update to the life sciences strategy, which I think was last year, pointed out that in AI, we managed to get more inward investment for AI in the UK than all European countries put together. So, you know, I don't think we're doing terribly, which is absolutely not to say we should rest on our laurels and kind of not do more, but we are seen as a phenomenally innovative place to invest. You know, we've seen, was it this week, the Abu Dhabi investment of 800 million or something? I mean, you know, this is not terrible, but I do think there are two things government could be doing better, which I'll take the opportunity to mention. One is, and Heba mentioned this, the regulatory process for data-driven health technology is mind-boggling. And at Reform, we did a piece of work actually in collaboration with NHSX, trying to just map the process that you'd have to go through if you were someone who wanted to come up with some type of health tech, data-driven health tech device, to actually get from the point of being able to access the data. Remember, the NHS is a phenomenal pool of data, be able to access it, put in place the right kind of commercial agreements, the right ethical standards, go through multiple regulators. We're not talking about single regulators, multiple points of regulation, which is not clear, there's overlap, there's gaps, it's terribly confusing, in order to do that all important part that Secretary of State is talking, which is commercialize it at the end. So I do think there's definitely a challenge for government to look at. If we want innovation, we have to have streamline, and I'm not talking medicines here, I'm talking, you know, med tech, health tech. We need to have a much better regulatory process. And I think the final comment of something the government can still improve is there's lots of ambition in government for ensuring that the NHS takes up the innovative products and medicines that are created. But there are problems in practice with that, and the NHS is not, you know, again, this has been pointed out in life science strategies, you know, the NHS is not always the fastest at adopting innovative new models or new medicines. And so for our medicines, for example, the MHRA, the regulatory process is brilliant, the standard is great, there's probably not that much that we need to do on it. The gap between having the regulator say something's okay and the NHS actually do it is far too long, and that's what forces businesses to go abroad to other countries, because they don't see the opportunity with the NHS taking up the innovation. And the knock-on impact of that is patients don't get this great stuff that companies in the UK are producing.
I think that's a really good point. Kwasi, do you want to come back on that at all?
I think that was there were some good remarks there. I mean, I think that one of the issues that Charlotte raised is that we're very good in this country at beating ourselves up about how badly we're doing. And let me just say, you know, this is actually a place where we're doing very well. So I totally accept that. I think there are things that we can do certainly to improve. And I think Charlotte makes a very good point about bureaucracy and slightly slow moving institutions in terms of that lag between, you know, an organization saying, or regulator saying this is okay, and then adoption. And in the meantime, the product goes elsewhere. But if you compare, as Charlotte did, our capacity to attract inward investment, she mentioned the Abu Dhabi deal. You know, I speak to people all over the world who are really eager to invest in the UK. I think, you know, in this area, I think we're doing very well. And I'd suggest that a lot of the problems we had in terms of what they call translating science into product are historic problems. I think at the moment, we're actually doing a lot better than we used to do in this space.
Thank you. That's a very good point to make there, especially around, you know, where we go now in terms of the future. I'd like to just touch upon a question that's come in regarding future pandemics. It's a horrible thing to say, and the fact that we are in the middle of one right now, but it's about preparation and making sure that we are identifying things that come our way, and so we never have to go through future lockdowns, and you know, robust and that resilience. And I wondered if you could comment just for a minute or two, Kwasi, just about the government's thought process around that. Because
no, I think what we've learned a huge amount. I mean, there's no doubt that when this thing really came upon us in March last year, there were no governments in the world really that had any precedent for what had happened, and people were learning you know, new things all the time. I think if we look at what's happened with the vaccine task force, the real skill, and you remember Kate Bingham was appointed. And there was, let's face it, there was huge amounts of media skepticism around this. And there were all sorts of stories about Tory cronyism and this and that. She did a fantastic job. And I think we've got the institutions. We know how to develop vaccines. We've vaccinated half the population, which has never happened before in such a short time. And there's a huge amount we've learned. And I'm hopeful that, you know, if God forbid something like this should happen again, we would be in a much better position to deal with it. There are, of course, as Rumsfeld said, unknown unknowns. So there are known unknowns, which is clearly another pandemic, but there are unknown unknowns. And of course, we've got to build enough resilience to be able to deal with them. But I think we're in a much better place, certainly, than we were just a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that many countries around the world look to us for that future preparation.
Absolutely right. We don't need to talk about what's going on in other countries, but clearly, what's happened here has been very successful. And there are many people around the world who are looking, dare I say, enviously at the efficiency with which we managed to roll out the vaccine.
Richard, can I come to you about being a big employer in the UK and what the future looks like in terms of the commitment to the country, to future employment, manufacturing and developing and producing here, and talking about the skills agenda that we talked about earlier. What is it the government can do more to help companies like yours? I mean, Hiba talks about the fact that she's getting products to market, and there's some talk around the MHRA. But what in terms of your business would help in terms of closer working relationship with the government over the next few years?
Look, I think there's been a spirit of collaboration over the last 3 or 4 years that many should take credit for. No one is trying to say it's perfect, and I mean that from all sides. So, but I think for me, firstly, let's take COVID as the catalyst for doing even more in terms of collaboration. For us, a huge amount is about talent. And I have to say, look, I'm not in competition with other parts of the world with Roche, but the two comparators are San Francisco and Switzerland. Well, let me tell you, we've got much bigger pools of talent in the UK at a much, much lower cost. It's not about the cost, it's about the talent. But the fact that you can bring those two things together in the UK, I think, honestly, we're in a unique position on that. I think we've got to still make sure that talent can flow in both directions. We're proud to be one of the biggest talent exporters in the Roche world, but also I'm very, very proud that in our headquarters in the UK, we've got 45 different nationalities. So continuing to have that smooth flow of talent in both directions, is actually what I would put as the top of my list, because I think it's the thing that gives us competitive edge versus any other country in the world at the present moment in time. And I think that's something that we've got to push more. I think it's working well. There may be some things to a degree outside of our control, which is what is going to be the pandemic impact on geographically agnostic working. I think it's going to be very interesting to see the world of business. And are we going to now see, we were very virtual even before the pandemic. I do have a slight concern that we had a pool of incredible talent, yes, admittedly, mainly in the southeast of the UK. Are we going to find those pools are suddenly in different places because of COVID? But I don't think that's going to dramatically change the dynamic. For us, everything is about talent, and I think we lead the world in this, and let's leverage it to achieve more.
And that reflects the earlier comment around working with outstanding universities as well, to make sure that we're providing the young talent that the businesses want in the future. We've got a question in from the audience, so I'd like to read that out if I may. We've spoken briefly about lessons learned from the pandemic, and we made significant strides in the UK in the development of infection prevention equipment. How widely do we think those products will be used in the future? Do we think that things like disinfecting shared desks, for example, will become the norm in offices moving forward? So I think it's about how we change our behaviour using particular products in the way that we would never have done before. I think that's kind of where that question might be coming from. Kwasi, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just very briefly on that. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. Just as someone who's interested in social and economic history, all I would say is that there'll be social behaviour, there'll be patterns in society that will be changed forever. And we won't actually know what the impact will be until maybe 5, even 10 years after this year. And then we'll look back and say, do you remember before COVID, we used to do X, Y, and Z. Now we're in the middle of the pandemic. It's difficult to see what the permanent changes will be, but there will certainly be permanent changes, I think. And I think in terms of cleanliness, a friend of mine was saying he was watching films yesterday, and he couldn't believe how close people were huddled, and all of that. And I think people's attitude to cleanliness, to contact with others, maybe all of that, I think will change. And I think we're not going to get back to the world pre-COVID. I think it's something that we will all remember as a life-changing event.
And it's, you know, same for things like shared spaces. So when
Exactly,
people coming back to work, you know, that hot desking environment that was so, you know, in all the
That's
rage,
right.
as it were, people might be thinking, no,
And I wonder about the tubes as well. I mean, the underground, will they ever be as full as they were, you know, before the pandemic? Maybe they will, but maybe they won't.
I think you're right, but public behaviour will change quite dramatically, quite possibly. So we're running out of time. We've only got a few minutes left. I'd like to ask the panel to wrap up and give me some closing comments. Charlotte, can I start with you on that, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really, my conclusion would be that exact point, that we should be very optimistic, that we should recognise just, you know, the kind of strength of this sector in the country, and the fact that, you know, it will play a massive role in the recovery, but be laser focused on those pinch points that are still holding us back in some respects. And I think the government is looking at that. As a very final comment, I'm slightly more skeptical there's going to be too many profound changes, and I think we probably will see a lot of people still hot desking and getting on the tube, but that could just be my preference, so I'll leave that there.
Eva, can I ask you to come in? Oh, you're on mute. And I knew I wouldn't get away with the whole event without saying that.
Well, I think thank you very, very much. It's it has been very interesting, to be honest, to hear the panel and the minister. But I think one thing I would say, we shouldn't worry about taking risk. I worked actually for a project for DARPA, and I'm really glad that we are having area and this has been establishing here, because they took a chance on something called Supercompiler, spent $16 million in 1 year. So I think in the same kind of context, we should take risk of adapting new technologies and trying to encourage them, because that's what will push us to go forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Heba. And Richard, may I ask you to come with a final comment?
Thank you. So just to reiterate, I think we should be semi-proud that we are in a strong and leading position in a number of areas. I'm going to say again, I think collaboration is key, and there's been some great examples of that. I do agree with the comments, and we could have spent 3/4 of an hour on access to innovation. I think we do still need to make greater progress in that area. I guess my only other comments are no arrogance. There is a hell of a lot of competition out there, as was previously stated, and we better be ready to compete. And as I said, the last piece I'm going to repeat again, let's make patients the ultimate recipient. Yes, we want UK flourishing, we want business flourishing, but we've also got to do more to make sure that UK patients flourish.
We always must bear that in mind. Kazi, I'm going to leave the last comment to you.
Just very briefly, I think Charlotte's right. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a whole sea change, but I think there will be, and the whole point about 5 years' time was that we won't know what the changes will be, but there will be some changes. I'm sure of that. I don't know what they will be, but there will be definitely. I think arrogance is absolutely the worst thing we could fall down on. Yes, we've got good prospects. Yes, it's an exciting time, but as Richard said, it's an extremely competitive environment, and we should never rest on our laurels. I remember years ago, a gentleman saying to me, you know, in the 50s, he watched an advert for cars, and they said, you know, of course the Germans make cars, but they can never compete with British Leyland. That was from Wada. And I heard, you know, and we must never ever fall down in that regard, and we've always got to be pushing ourselves.
Great, thank you. Well, we've run out of time. I'm sorry that we didn't get through all the questions that were put to us today. Thanks to the panel for a really enjoyable session. Of course, the Secretary of State for you giving up your time today. I know that you're very, very busy. Finally, thanks to our audience for putting those questions into this event held by In-House Communications this afternoon. All that's left for me to say is have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.